And welcome back again to the Authenticity in Action podcast. Thank you to everyone who has followed, liked, subscribed, listened to episodes, given me feedback. I'm super excited, and I really love that you're getting something out of the guests that I've brought on. And today, buckle up, you are in for some golden nuggets of goodness. I'm so excited to have the one and only Mike Giardina jump on the podcast. For those in the CrossFit space, you'll know him from his work with CrossFit HQ, seminars, training, the whole gamut. For anyone else, though, that's not just Mike's whole world. Like, he has a broad range of experiences in his life, which we're going to dig into some of that today. So welcome, my friend. I'm very, very excited to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the great introduction. Thank you for having me on here. The pressure is on. Now I have to live up to that introduction.
No pressure at all. It's fine. It's I think I probably undersold you from, if people do a quick Google search, like, it touches on so many things that your name pops up with, and it's very cool. Very cool. And I've been lucky enough to speak to you before in a CrossFit sense, and we will touch on some of that today.
Sure.
Because I think it's important that, for coaches and affiliate owners and people in training as well, understand, like, there is a role to live authentically in that space, where sometimes we feel pressure to not. And you've had so many roles in the ecosystem. So, as we touched on before we hit record, the aim of the podcast is I want to share people's journeys with finding their own authentic selves, and then how they actually live that in action. The tagline of the podcast is that authenticity is not just a vibe, it's a verb, it's a doing word. And if we're not out there doing the hard work and making that work, then it's just a buzzword. And I think as humans, we deserve better than that. So I guess to kick off is the way that I generally start with every guest is finding out how you personally define authenticity, and has that definition evolved through your time in fitness and health and leadership roles that you've had?
Yeah, great question. I do wonder how many different definitions you get on this.
A few.
Yeah, do you? Okay,
Yeah.
It's if I boiled it down into something simple but not easy, I would say that authenticity is living in accordance with your essence. So who you truly are, right? Very simple, right? Act in accordance with who you truly are. The hard part of that is, who are you truly?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the tough part. That's the question that takes a lot of introspection, a lot of thought, a lot of work, a lot of deliberation, and not an easy thing to find.
No, and I think a lot of people tend to shy away from that. They'll hit it on the surface level, like, yeah, I'm this kind of person. But to really do the work and unpack those layers, I have a authenticity blueprint program that I work through with clients, trying to figure out, where, if they're trying to go through a major life change of some sort. And the very first step is, let's identify your values, because that's, that's the ground floor. Because when you figure out who you are, then you're going to know what you accept, what you won't accept, the direction that you want to go in. Makes decisions a lot less emotional and more binary, as in, does this align with who I am? No? Okay, cool. It's out. I don't even need to wrestle with it. Becomes a lot clearer and frees up a lot more bandwidth, I think. But
you're your own CEO, right?
Yeah. But we have to give ourselves permission to declare that and make those decisions. Go, well, okay, this is how I am now. I had Pat Barber on one of the first episodes, and he was like, if you can look in the mirror and be 100% honest with yourself about who you are and who am I actually showing up as, then that's being, honesty takes honesty to be, authentic in a way.
Yeah, I think if you were to have a large group of people provide an explanation or a definition of what they thought in authenticity is, the word honesty would probably come up throughout most of those definitions, right? So,
and I think it has to, but people tend to just, that's icky, that's hard, that's uncomfortable. I'm just going to go to the shiny, buzzword version and just this is where I'm at. But you can only maintain that kind of facade for so long before it's just too exhausting, and then people do get to peek behind and go, oh no, this is who they really are, not this version that they're pointing out. Like, social media makes it very easy for people to portray themselves in X way, and then someone meets them in person. There's that old saying, never meet your heroes, you're bound to be disappointed. It's like, well, no, like, you want someone to meet you, you go, oh, they're exactly the same as over here.
Yeah. Well, social media is interesting because not only are the people you're interacting with being betrayed, but there's now research that shows that you're essentially betraying yourself, right? So people who are very, and obviously, and I'm generalizing here, but there are people that they've shown that are very active in social media that are portraying, I'm not even gonna say the best versions, but maybe some fake versions of what's going on, but then see their own social media and then seeing that their real life isn't actually the life that is portrayed as them on social media, becomes depressing. Like it leads to further depression, because it's like, here I am, there's this divide between this version of myself and this version of myself. And I think, well, that's not being authentic, right? So that if we can minimize that divide, and I'm not saying specifically about social media, but like you said, and how we portray ourselves out in the world, and then who we really are. Well, yeah, that would be being authentic.
And I think as well, people, like, when we're not living in alignment and we have that disconnect and that divide, like, our souls and our bodies know. And eventually it catches up to you, because, it starts to manifest in, physical issues, like you're bone tired, or you're, everything hurts, or you have skin issues, or you have sleep issues. And it's, people spend months and months going through doctors going, well, having every test, what's wrong with me? No, nothing's showing. As soon as they do some of this other work and actually start living in alignment with who they really are, a lot of these things magically clear up.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You will get found out. Like, your body will compensate so much for things, but then at a point it's like, dude, I can't keep doing this anymore. And it starts throwing things at you to slap you in the head to go, something needs to be corrected here. But we overlook it and think, we look at the symptom, not at, oh, it's not just a simple I'm tired, or I've got a headache, or my skin's crap. It's all these other things behind it, which I think, the medical world is yet to catch up on, but it's still a core piece that if your soul knows, it's going to come out at some point. You can only do it for so long.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even more than physical manifestations, and I'm speaking, about myself, but, mental manifestations as well. Fear, anxiety, embarrassment, shame, all these things start to happen.
And they're heavy to carry. They are,
oh yeah, it's much, anger replaces most of those things, right? It's a little bit easier to carry, is being angry versus accepting that I'm embarrassed or I'm shameful for something, and then being able to communicate that and solve that problem, rather just have a socially acceptable reaction of anger, right? Which it's more socially acceptable. But
it's really funny, because a couple of weeks ago, before I went through my life change and started living with an alignment who I was, and went through a whole process of coming out and all that sort of stuff, I had, I'd been a member at this golf club, and I was playing recently with a lady who knew me back then, and she goes, just randomly, we're wandering down the hole, and she says, "You seem much happier now." She said, "When you were here last time, I was kind of scared of you. You're very angry." And I was like, oof, that stung. And then I thought about it, go, well, actually, yeah, I was. because I was always fighting some battle. But even though the battle was in here, because I just didn't fit in my own life, I was, battles with other affiliate owners and battles with members and battles. And, my whole life has been fighting one thing or another, because that was an outward way of having a release for that tension. It's like, well, it must be something else, till you look inside and go, oh, shit, found it. But it was really interesting that she made that comment, and she's like, yeah, I was kind of scared of you. And I was like, oh, awkward. But it really made me reflect on that and think on that. And but there were all those other feelings, shame, guilt, all this other confusion. It was just easy to be angry with the world and to keep fighting battles, because that meant I didn't have to deal with stuff over here, which is, you're like, oh, cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, we find those. I mean, there's a joke in my family, and my kids and I can laugh at it, but deep down, I'm like, man, that hurts. That one stings a little bit. But my kids will be like, remember when you used to be angry all the time, or used to, yell all the time? And yes, I do remember. And thankfully, I've been putting in a lot of work, and where there is a lot more patience and communication and understanding and acceptance and all these things that we need. But I definitely remember the time when it wasn't that way, and the initial reaction was just anger, and it was yelling, and it was control, because that's what that's how I handled it, right?
And it's when we have that sense of loss of control, like we're on this train that's just spiraling down these tracks, we try and cling to any small thing that we can have for control. And we can look back on that and judge ourselves quite harshly. But also, I tend to now try and look through, well, when I did the best I could with what I knew then, but now I know better, I can do better. Yeah. And I can't change that. And I have to give myself grace for the journey that brought me to that point, and then grace for the journey forward, and go, yeah, that probably wasn't me at my best, but that was my best at that time. That was my 100%. And now I'm trying to be different. And that's okay.
Giving yourself grace. That's the one. That's the tough one.
It is. We need to be more, and like that's been a hard part of my journey, is grace, because I'm, I have been naturally a bit perfectionistic and have high standards and high expectations. When I do the work and realize what that linked back to, I can ease up on that. But as humans, like, we need to have grace for ourselves and grace for someone else's journey. I can tell you something, and, particularly when I talk to people about the whole journey of coming out, like, that's like, you got to do it every day in a million different ways. And sometimes we can feel entitled to an appropriate response. So if I made my big statement to you and you were like, oh, wow. And I get affronted because I'm like, why aren't you, throwing me a pride parade or having a great big party for me and being happy? But I've had years to get used to this version of me. You've known me for X amount of years, and now in 30 seconds, I've changed your whole world, and expect that you should be okay with that. But I need to have grace for you to go, this is new information. Mike's going to need a minute. And that's okay.
Yeah, that is, I mean, there's a lot there, right? To be able to think through that while it's taking place, because I'm sure, and I don't want to assume, but there's an initial reaction, a slight delay, and then the thought of, wait a second, let me give this person some grace for those reasons specifically. That's totally understand that.
Yeah, but it's also hard to do. But unless you can give yourself grace and go, my journey's, I'm okay with me, then then you cannot give that to somebody else, because you're still almost, fighting and needing that validation to be okay. But if I'm okay with me, then I can give you that space and go, hey, let's circle back, and God, I hate that term. Let's come back to this and chat, about it once you've had some time to think on it. And if you have questions, reach out. Like, and let's talk then, but let's go have dinner now, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's
yeah.
but it's not having expectations on someone else to be or do anything that you need because you've got it here. Like, I'm already meeting my own needs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I was faced with that quite a bit. I've done a few psychedelic retreats, and on the last one, I was in Peru, and we it was an ayahuasca retreat. But anyways, yeah, there was some time of I guess self acceptance. This being like trusting and loving and cherishing myself, and putting some trust in there, and then everything else I don't necessarily have control over, right? So
yeah
interesting lesson to learn.
Yeah, and you've spoken really widely about using psychedelics like psilocybin for healing. And for those that don't know, it's the naturally, if I can say the word, occurring psychedelic compound found in the active ingredients of what we would generally call magic mushrooms. And it's been getting more mainstream and widespread attention for its potential in trauma healing and mental health, and digging in through that. So what role did that play for you in uncovering or reconnecting with your authentic self?
Yeah, well, there was, when we talk about giving yourself grace, that was a major part of my first experience. And it came out in different terminology, but it's exactly what it meant to some degree. And really the phrase that was provided to me and then echoed and changed the entire trajectory of the journey was open up your heart. Now, I interpreted that as open up your heart, meaning one, love myself, give myself some grace, right? Two, be able to give that to other people. And then three, allow other people to provide that to me. And something that simple completely changed the trajectory of where those journeys were going. So my first one was very dark, and I was in a dark place, and it was probably significant to exactly what we were talking about, this idea of not living authentically, having this separation between who you are really and then who you're portraying to the world. And man, it was dark. I mean, it was hard, and a lot of things popped up throughout that. And on the second one, I was going back into that place, and one of the healers that was there, it was pretty cool because they're descendants of the Aztecs, so the Aztec culture. And he came up, and when we do this, we have these blindfolds on, and I'm there. You always have this feeling of connectedness to everyone that's around you when you're doing. I'm not gonna say always, but quite often. And I'm sitting there, I'm laying there, and I have my eye mask on, and I could feel it, man. I could feel that, like, literal feeling of being pulled down into something really dark again. And I remember just thinking to myself, with the level of consciousness that I had at the time, like, I do not want to go back here. And I'm like, oh man, I don't want to go back to this place. This place is hard, and it's dark, and it's like all the things that I've been dealing with over decades. And it was that, like, victim mentality space, of like, life is acting upon you, life isn't acting for you, right? And then that little shift can be profound and thought and how you think about it. But anyways, and I'm sitting there, or I'm laying there, and as I'm thinking this, he comes up, and we're all in this space, and it's kind of like a circle. And I don't know if he's walking around to other people because I'm not that in tune with everybody else, like what's happening around the room. I'm so engulfed in my own journey and experience here. But he just comes up and he puts his hand on my chest and he says, "Brother, you got to open up your heart." Walks off.
Wow.
And I thought about it, like I meditated on that. And this is like at the crescendo, like this is like at the, that ascent, that lift off is where you're like, like, I don't know what's going to happen here. This is crazy. And I'm like, okay, like let's, surrender to opening up your heart. Like that's what we're going to surrender to here. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And first and foremost, it was like, opening up my heart was giving myself some love. Like that was the first thing I felt like I needed to do. And then, thinking about what that meant to provide that to other people and, how I could accept love and support from others. And it's like, it's that mix of things. I mean, I spent so much of my life being afraid. That's why I said a lot of those, this idea of not living authentically led to fear for me. And I acted out of fear. And daily, my decisions were based off of fear. And I felt that fear. And that first journey was all fear. It's all I felt was fear. And I was afraid and I was scared. And as I started to think about, this idea of opening up your heart, and then an understanding of what love and support I really had, fear starts to disappear, right? Like it's, let me rephrase that because you're never going to get rid of it, but it becomes a lot easier to take on. You know what I mean? So, and that's what that changed, and where it went from there was pretty significant. I had just lost my sister months before that to suicide, and obviously with suicide you don't have any closure. There's no closure involved with that, and it was just really hard to understand. And of course I missed her, and I wanted time back with her, and that the shift from that line of thinking and this understanding and this feeling of love for myself, love for others, love from others, I could actually feel this upward lift. And like there was this obvious, this tension of like feel like I was getting pulled down, this feel like I was getting pulled up, and all this stuff is, there's some things that don't need a lot of explanation, but all this is kind of happening in my own head. How what's going on? I'll let the scientists figure that stuff out. But there's this breakthrough point, and at that moment, everything had changed. Everything that was dark and scary in color and energy and movement that was taking place became a completely different set of colors and a completely different energy. And these colors and this energy and this feeling was extremely familiar. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, I know this. Like I know this. Like I've been here. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden it just brings me back to the June, like the prior June 2023. And that was the last time I was with my sister in person. And at that night, we're 15 years apart. So when my father died by suicide, she was 13. And, I took on a different role, obviously her brother, but had to have some type of parental figure to her. Obviously my mom was there, but sometimes my mom would be like, hey, I need you to tell your sister that, so I took on these different roles. And this is one of the first times, like, we just went out, man, like brother, sister, friends, my cousin was there, and we were out in Long Island and we were having a good time, and we stayed out till like, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning. I don't remember what time it was, definitely longer than I should have stayed out, but I was acting like I was a in my late 20s again. And we were just acting like idiots and dancing and having fun. And I remember I kept coming up to her and hugging her and telling her I loved her and how proud I was of her. And I remember even telling her, like, I don't even know why I feel like I have to tell you this over and over again, because I've told you so many times tonight, but I just have to tell you, like, I love you. I'm so proud of you. And I give her a hug and she laughed and I love you too. And this whole thing. And it was that, like, that was it. And it was, it's like, man, talk about, you hear it all the time. The antidote to fear is love. Like that's the whole thing. Right. And that just played out in real time. And it's like, I've had multiple events like that under psychedelics where you can read something, you can hear it, somebody can tell you about it, love is the antidote to fear, be present, all these things. And it's like, great, I get it. I understand it. Like, how do I put this into action? What does this feel like? And then in these retreats and under these psychedelics, you feel it, right? And it's like, oh, not to mention when I had this experience with this type of energy, it's unworldly, right? Like it's not something we get to experience in our daily lives. It's awe. It's something that is so profound and unexplainable that you're like, there is something out there much bigger than myself. So having that experience of awe, of like, I don't know what this energy is. I don't know what this means. I don't know how I got here. It's beautiful. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, smile. Like it was overwhelming. But it was, when you talk about diminishing this sense of self and, like, hey, not everything's not about me, like crushing the ego to some extent, or maybe taming the ego, because you can never completely get rid of it. You just kind of have to understand it and tame it to some extent. But anyways, my body didn't know how to react to it. And Jesse Gould, who started Heroic Hearts, we were lucky enough to have him as part of our retreat, and he was one of the facilitators, and he was set up right next to me, making sure everything was good. And I can only imagine, because I'm in it and my mask is on, that it like you would expect anybody to respond to something, and I'm going to say spiritual, and I'm going to say this without any religious, like, it is, everyone has their own beliefs, but some type of spiritual experience as profound as that, your body doesn't know how to handle it. So I must have been laughing, crying, not breathing at the same time. He puts both his hands on my chest and he's like, you got to breathe. Like, you got to keep breaths, man. And, it's like, it pulled me right out of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I'm trying to be quiet because everyone else is still in their thing. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck just happened. And I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. And
wow.
Yeah.
And
real.
I think it's amazing, and it, when that dude put his hand on your chest and said, dude, you got to let love in. Like, you've got to open your heart. And then as soon as you stopped fighting and took down the defenses, everything just flowed in. But when it's that battling and fighting and having defenses because we're afraid, once you get rid of those, which is under normal circumstances, if it's just you sitting in a room with somebody to take you through that, you probably wouldn't have got that. Like, sometimes we need something that's going to just lighten the load on our brain and get rid of the practical manual thought processes that we automatically have that disables that allows you to access that where you're like, I don't have any control, but this is now pulling me in the right direction because now I've let myself be full of good things rather than, because while we're operating in fear, I think, and defensive, we're trying to keep out bad things, we forget that we keep out all the good things as well.
Absolutely.
You just can't filter it that well on a conscious level, I don't think.
No, you can't. And it's really hard because your nature sets you up this way, right? It's why are those defenses up? Why are we focusing on all the bad? Because prior to, our existence and what we are now, these experiences and dwelling on these experiences is what kept us safe, thousands of years ago. Right. And then it manifests in things like fear of failure of being alone. And those things are, they're valid as well. Not as much now because we live in a different world, but in terms of, our biology and how our brain is kind of conditioned. Look, if being alone and failing and being judged and being casted out of your group or out of your tribe or whatever it is like you're dead. That's death, right? So there are all these fears that come up and all these defenses based off of our own experiences, our own past, and then just our own biology that make it really hard to do this, right? And you take people. And I'm not, veterans, because a lot of veterans have been through some pretty traumatic things, but not only veterans. Obviously, right? There's most people. Let's change that. Everybody suffers, and some people have suffered more than others, right? So, we put up these walls, just like you said. We put up these defense mechanisms, and we block out the bad, and yes, we block out the good, and it becomes very hard to knock those defenses down. And that's what this has been able to do for me. But it's not, and I want to say this because I think it's really important for people who are interested in this type of therapy or healing, is like, it's not magic. It's not like the defenses come down and then I leave this beautiful, I was lucky enough to be in this place called Jalapa, like right on the ocean, the jungle of Mexico, or I was in the mouth of this jungle in Tarapoto, Peru, which was unbelievable. And you're disconnected from everything, and there's jungle noises and all this stuff. And you're like, wow, this is beautiful. And the walls come down and you can see clear. And then you come home. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Now I'm connected again, and social media and email, and I have work obligations and parenting obligations. And the world is acting on me in all these ways. And I used to have this path, and this path kind of sucked, but at least I had a path. And now, you're back, and there is no more path, right? Like the path is gone. There's like the trees are gone, the forest's gone. Like the world is infinite again and full of possibility and wonder. And you're like a child, but you have the responsibilities of an adult. And you're like, okay, well, there's infinite ways that I can go, and I don't know where to go, right? And I think that's where the real work begins. With psychedelics, it's like you can't expect to come back and be like, I'm cured, right? It's like, well, yeah, I come back, and now I have this neuroplasticity, right? This plastic brain where it's like, okay, I can mold it, I can change these connections, and I can change how I react to things, and I can change how I present myself. I can change all this stuff, but I'm gonna have to put in the work. I'm going to have to do it consistently. I'm going to have to think about it. I'm going to have to write about it. I'm going to have conversations about it. I'm going to have to think about what I did. And then was that the right thing? And then, what are the other, you're going to have to put in a lot of work in there. And it's like going back to what we had said earlier. It's like, well, listen, if you want to live authentically, you need to figure out who you truly are. And it's like, that's not as easy as just saying, well, yes, like you're going to have to put in some work.
And that process of healing opened the door to possibilities, but you've still got to walk through it and until and it was interesting what you said about the way our brains are wired. We are wired towards a negative just for survival, and our brains, like, for as much as we've evolved, there are some elements about our evolution that are still prehistoric. So when we're feeling afraid and stressed and overwhelmed, our brain doesn't know that it's because of a traumatic event, or our boss was being a dick, or we've had a fight with our partner, or our kids are brats. It thinks we're about to be eaten by a woolly mammoth, and it still behaves and causes our hormonal responses on that basis.
Yeah.
So it's only when we can stop and step back and give ourselves a chance to breathe that our body goes, oh, well, if you're just sitting in the jungle, then clearly there's no danger. So cool, I'm going to stand down. But we still operate on these fear responses to keep ourselves safe because we don't trust our judgment, because that's why we're wired to the negative, because humans are dumb and we do dumb things all the time.
Mm.
And we're wired for, oh, don't eat that berry, don't eat this. So we don't have an innate trust. And it's very hard then to go to trust that feeling and to trust that I can deliver that to myself. So that's the work. Like, that therapy showed you what was possible and what it can feel like, but I still have to go and trust that I can continually, consciously give that to myself until it becomes an automatic way of operating.
Yeah. And that's being truly alive, right? And in my opinion, is this idea of, if we took it to, and I am no neuroscientist, so I'm going to go very general because it's not my area of expertise, but you have what you described as the limbic system, right? And then the prefrontal cortex. And being truly alive is being able to challenge your limbic system using this beautiful thing that's called our prefrontal cortex, right? And what happens if you don't? Well, I know exactly what happens. And to me, when I don't, you react, right? You don't, you said something really profound, and it was like, you got to step back, give yourself some time, you know, and not act how you initially want to act, right? And that's a very important part of this thing, because if you don't, when there's the reaction, for me, it was this. It was, okay, something happens, I react. Then I think. And then I think, man, I don't really like the way I reacted. So I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed. But I'm not going to tell you I'm ashamed or embarrassed, because those are very vulnerable feelings to have. And I don't feel comfortable telling you that. So now I'm going to get angry. And now I'm
double down.
Happy I'm angry. So I'm just going to completely shut down. I just won't talk for 2 days. And then I'm act like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And that was the cycle that took place.
And we keep, like, when we enter that shame and fear sort of an embarrassment space, we double down on what it is we're originally doing. So like, I feel ashamed and I'm fearful and I was angry, but now I'm going to double down on that anger and say, well, you made me do this.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yes.
And that's when we get into that whole, like, definitely don't look over here. There's nothing to see here. Like, it's all, the world is happening to me and I'm in that space. And it's really easy to get, into that. So, you have performed a lot of roles and worn a lot of hats in the CrossFit space, as I touched on the intro. You've been, an athlete at the pointy tip of the spear, a coach, an educator, the leading force of the health initiatives initially. In that journey through those various roles in such a space that's defined by performance, whether it be physical, aesthetic, career progression, making your way up through the ranks, well, did you at first feel pressure to perform and be a certain version of Mike? And then how did you, push back on that, I guess, a little bit to be something that was closer to what you thought was authentically you at that time?
Yeah. Well, let me answer your first question. Did I feel like I had to portray this certain version of myself? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you some examples. Even from early on, I think early on when I first got into CrossFit, I ended up being pretty good at it, right? Especially in the early days, there weren't a lot of people doing it yet. So I was pretty good. That changed as more people started to do it. But in the early days, I was pretty good. And I remember being at a seminar, and it was what the level 2 was back then, which was like an internship. This is probably, I don't know, 2007. And I did Fran with the group. And I remember Dave coming up and he's like telling people like, oh, look at this. Like, this is a legit time. And I remember from that point on, I was like, okay, well, I just have to, that's it. That's what I need to do. I need to just crush everybody. And make a name for myself in this thing. And I remember, and do I think that was necessary? No, I just think Dave was like, hey, look at that. This is awesome. I mean, even back then you made it on staff because of who you were, right? Were they willing to travel with you or be delayed 12 hours in an airport with you, that kind of stuff? And yes, how you coached, but did they think you were coachable? Right? Because back then, like, we weren't great trainers. We were okay with the knowledge that we had, because knowledge was sparse back then. We didn't have, it was, but can they train us to become good trainers? So, but in my head, it was based off of performance. And I remember after my dad died, which was February, I went to regionals. I think regionals back then might have been, I don't know, April, I don't know, spring time. So it wasn't far after, maybe a little later, but it was a few months after. And I didn't qualify. And I didn't qualify because, I did something really dumb. I was going up a rope, and there was a rope climb workout. No, I was doing double unders, and my shoe came untied, and I kept hitting the rope. So I took my shoe off and threw it. And then I struggled climbing a rope because I had one shoe. My sock kept sliding. But anyways, so I didn't qualify. And I remember thinking, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to work for CrossFit anymore. Because, I remember texting Dave, like, man, I'm so sorry I didn't make it, and, it meant that didn't matter to him. But to me, and that was the start of it, right? And it only really got worse since then. And it's been like that ever since. I mean, to be honest with you, Lisa, I think it's been like that since I decided to leave. And CrossFit, it's interesting because I've talked about this with other people. I think most people who go to the gym don't have this problem, which is beautiful. It's great, right? The gym they go in there. Yeah, it's part of their identity. They're a CrossFitter. It's part of the things that they do, but they have work and they have family and they're this, they're a golfer. They're all these things. It's just part of the identity, right? And you go to the gym and it's 1 hour and then they leave and it's like, it's a cool community and it is what it is. It wasn't how it was for me and it wasn't how it was for a few other people. It became too much of my identity. So, my own self-worth was how am I performing relative to other people? Am I needed in this company? How am I valued in this company? And you talked about this a little while ago, but I took all the things that were going on, whether it was my own performance in the gym or my own performance at work, and I made it about them. Okay, so what I mean by that is like, all right, so I didn't get a promotion. I didn't move up to the place I wanted to move in CrossFit. I didn't, whatever it might have been. It wasn't about me. It was about them. It was their fault. I mean, it became too much of me. And it really led to me leaving. And to be honest with you, and I say this, and I don't say this as I think CrossFit is amazing. I think it's an amazing training tool. I think there's some people who do it better than others. But I think it's great. And I'm glad I did it, but I don't go to an affiliate anymore. I don't really train that way right now. I'm not going to say I never will again, but I've needed to kind of release that. Like it can't be my identity anymore.
And that's, I think a lot of people that do go into CrossFit and it's the joke, like the CrossFit, when you first start, like you're all in, how do you know someone does CrossFit? That's all they can talk about. And I did this, and you're at work and people's eyes are glazing over while you're talking about, some weird, crazy thing that you've done. And I know for me, when I started in CrossFit and then became a coach and then an affiliate owner, that was my identity. Like people would say, who is Lisa? And I go, I'm a coach, I'm a affiliate owner. And then when I didn't have the affiliate anymore, it was like, well, who am I? Like, where do I fit on the planet? Like, what's my purpose? What's my role? And, and I think a lot more people struggle with that within the CrossFit ecosystem than would ever admit to it, even at the top of the spear, that they haven't done that process of who am I without it. And so they keep doing the things and maybe feeling that disconnected from who they really are and can't make that journey back to themselves because this is who I am. And they're too scared to figure out, who they are without that. And could be amazing.
Well, fear, right?
Yeah.
First of all, what you said, it like hits the nail on the head with how I felt for years, especially towards the end of my career with CrossFit. And once again, like I said, this is me. This is not a bashing of CrossFit or anything. No. It's how I let it become me and who I am. And what you said was, that is it. Like, it became so much of my identity that I understanding my purpose and meaning, or this idea of your essence, who you truly are. I couldn't do it. Like I was too connected to this one thing. This was who I was, but it's not, right? But this became who I was. And then the fear of making that change was eating me alive. And it was only after that Mexico retreat, because one of the things that happened, and kind of bring it back to this, but one of the things that happens in some of those ceremonies or those journeys is like, it's a very concentrated experience of what you feel maybe every day. Right? So like this idea of like getting sucked down to this dark place where like fear, and I don't know if you saw the 60 Minutes episode, but I shook like I was having like a seizure, and I couldn't control it. And of course I tried to resist it. And the more I tried to resist it, the more I shook. But anyways, so that's fear. And then after that, I started to make this connection of, this kind of uneasy feeling in my stomach, the kind of anxiety that would take these feelings that would come up at certain times in certain situations were like smaller versions of what was taking place there. And I made that connection, and I'm like, I am just controlled by fear, and specifically about giving this part of my life up, shedding this part of my identity, which is okay. And just because you do it, it's nothing to do. It's not saying that part of me was bad or I wish I didn't do it. It's just, it was time to shed that part of who I was. And that is hard.
Yeah. It's hard to let go. And particularly when you've used that as as your identity, so almost like the coat that you wear, it's like, well, if I don't have that, I'm going to be 100% exposed, and even exposed to myself as like, I don't know who I am. It's very confronting. And like I've been through several phases, I guess, in the last 5 years. Like, first of all, coming out late in life and changing that identity and owning that.
Yeah.
And then, closing the affiliate, and then, moving out of a role I was in December, which, I loved, but it's like, well, what value do I contribute to the world now if I'm just Lisa on an island kind of thing? And it's only through having, and it was still hard, but it was a process. But for me, it was about, what do I value within myself that I can't let myself stay in this toxic environment? So I need to remove myself for myself, my family, and because I value myself so highly, I can't continue to allow myself to be devalued. And that, because I'd done all the work and understood, fears, and like my wife and I, she's a counselor by trade, so there's a skill set for you, is talking about, well, what are you afraid of? Why is this hard for you? Because she could sit back one step removed and go, well, this is happening. I'm like, no. She's like, no, this is what's happening to you. What are you afraid of? And, you know, there were so many moments where it was like, well, I don't feel like I contribute, and like I don't belong. I don't have anything valuable to offer. And once she goes, but you do. Like, there's so many things that you can do. You're not just defined by this. And I was like, oh, I did that thing again where I just attached my identity to something that didn't belong to me, was not in my control, but I made it about me. I made it mine because I was so proud to do it. And then I'm like, oh. And then once I could release that, it was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, like I said to her a month ago, we're about 5 months in now, and I've never been more creative in my life. Like, I'm pinging with ideas and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this. And, you know, I've written 2 books and all these sort of things and a couple of podcasts and everything. And I'm like, oh, I've got an idea. I'm going to go run away and do that. And I said, I've never been so creative. She goes, it's because you're just free to do and you're not defined by the boundary of this thing that you said was you. And I'm like, oh, now it started to temper down. Now my brain's like, okay, well, let's focus on 2 or 3 things. But I was sitting there, I was like, I'm writing and I'm creating, and I'm like, I'm creating all these things. I've got like 15 Instagram accounts and all these different ideas. She goes, okay, let's consolidate. But that's good, you know, to have that. And when I spoke to Pat Barber, he's had the similar thing, you know, he's just recently had a change and he's like, all I'm seeing now is a world of opportunities.
Yeah, oh my
because
God.
You're not constrained. And I'm like, as hard as that it was, then you're like, but now look at the freedom I've afforded myself of, there are no barriers.
It's really interesting to hear you describe your journey there, and even the timeline of it, because it's very close to mine. I left in December, and it was the same type of thing where, okay, well, typically if I'm introduced, if somebody makes a connection, right? One of the first things that is said is, this is Mike G, he's an OG CrossFitter, he did my level 1 or my level 2, he went to the games or whatever it is. Like, that is how I'm typically introduced to somebody or connected with somebody. Those are the bullet points that they use to tell somebody about who I am. And that's how it's been, right? So when you remove that, I mean, people don't remove that, but when I remove that, it's like, well, who the heck am I now? And I can relate to what you said with like, okay, well, like, what do I have to give now? What value can I provide now that that's gone? And you know, I told my wife, well, first of all, it's really nice to have, you open up your heart and you let love in, right? And it's really nice to have love and support of another, but also allow them to love and support you. It wasn't easy for me.
No, 100%.
Yeah, it's very hard to do, and it took some time. But you know, being able to do that now has made things a lot easier. It's like gosh, the creativity. But my point is, so I decided I was going to take a couple months and not do anything, because I had this opportunity to do that. I didn't have to worry about anything. Like, I was in a good spot. And that is hard.
Yeah.
The hardest, and it's like, well, okay, if the hardest thing for you to do is do nothing, then maybe that's where the growth is. And I fought it. You're talking about resistance. Yep. I was like, I quit CrossFit and was looking, it didn't take days before I was looking for contracts.
Yeah.
What can I do? How can I contract? Who else needs education work? And then I was like, what the heck am I doing? And I stopped and I took some time, and that time was hard. That doing nothing was hard. And we can go into a whole nother thing here, but I realized that this idea of doing nothing was hard is because the messaging that we get these days is, you gotta, excuse my language, fucking grind.
Yep.
Nonstop.
That's the badge of honor. That's the standard. That's like every, so many affiliate owners get stuck in that because they're told, like, you need to work harder, you need to do more, and they celebrate the grind. He's a hard worker, she's a hard worker. And yeah, when I stepped back, because Sharon was like, you didn't stop after the affiliate closed, you just leapt into this next thing. She said, you could probably have 6 months off and you can just write your book and I'm like, oh, because as a child, you're conditioned to, if I just want to sit and watch TV for the afternoon, that's lazy. And that's a triggering thing for me, because that's
Me too.
What I was referred to as a kid. And and I even found myself, I'd be sitting and I'd say, oh, yeah, sorry, I just sat and watched XYZ this afternoon. I just did some reading or writing. And she's like, stop apologizing for doing what you need to do. If you need to take a nap, go take a nap. Because for a while there, I was working, I was working US time and I'm based in Australia. It's like, if you need to sleep, go to sleep. That's fine. Like, that's okay. And she said, when I finished, she's like, you can just stop and do nothing for a few and decompress. And I was like, oh, well, I feel like I've got to contribute. And she goes, you don't. You are contributing. If you're contributing to stuff around the house, that's contributing. It doesn't always have to be about dollars or time or projects or success. And for me, and it's funny, in the chat episode I did with Pat Barber, he brought up a really point where I was like, where he talked about that when people have difficulties in relationships when they're older, it's because that always fighting thing is they never came from receiving unconditional love in some way. They've never had that. And I was like, oh, shit, triggered. That was me. And it was very hard. Like, I think now is the only time in my life where I have truly experienced unconditional love. And I'm now 50 years old. And I know I've been loved, but not unconditionally. And to have someone say, it's okay to do what you need for you right now. Like, even if I think, I'm frustrated with my golf game, I want to work on it. Sharon's like, well, go work on it. Don't ask for permission. Just go do it. Like, what can I do to make that easier for you? And I would do a million things freely for her, but it's taken me a long time to do things freely for me. Because it's that where we get back to that giving and receiving love, it starts with the self. But understanding that I can be valuable and contribute just by being me and just by, standing and doing what I'm doing. It doesn't have to be a big thing with fireworks and banners. And my identity now is Lisa. Like, I remember when I set up my website, just lisakirkman.com, I was like, this feels icky. And then I had to lean into it, go, well, why does it feel icky? And move that imposter syndrome and all that stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
And move past that fear that there is someone out there. I'm compelled to tell my story because there is someone out there that I don't know and will never know, but they will hear it and it will make their path a little better. And
100%. That's
now my purpose. And I go, and whether it's through helping affiliate owners or whether it's through authenticity coaching or just putting out podcasts, there's someone who will get something. And I'm compelled to move myself past the fear and do the work, because if I don't, someone else is going to miss out. But it's a hard road.
It's interesting because and everyone's work is their own, and I'm only thinking through this, but it's like you start to figure out this idea of like, why am I here? Like, well, it starts to show itself when you put the work in, right?
Yep.
Which is super interesting. And it kind of goes back to this idea of like, well, that's your essence. Now you act in accordance with your essence, and there's your authenticity, right? And
and it's easier to do things like, at first when I started, because I've got a second podcast where I talk about my journey coming out late and I have guests on in that, like, I kept that very separate from Lisa Kirkman over here. It was very separate. Like, it was like, didn't follow any mutual accounts. Like, it was very separate. And then when I released a book release recently, there's a little bit of crossover there. And I'm like, it's like, dude, this is your life. You're proud of your life. Like, and if people don't accept that, then that's okay. Their part in your story is done now. And I can be okay. Whereas I used to amass people, but now it's like, I just need this small group who are my tribe and my herd and going to travel with me. and anyone else that doesn't fit into that, because I know my values now, then that's okay. Something Sharon and I say a lot, I just leave them with it. That's their story. I just leave them with it, and I can create my own stories or not, and that's okay. And you decide who you bring forward with you in that adventure, for sure.
I love it. Absolutely. Gosh, it's just, I just relate so much to everything you've said. I felt the same way. Obviously, it's completely different, but I felt similarly in this idea of even talking about psychedelics for the reasons of like, well, what are people going to think?
Yeah.
I have this like fitness Mike, he does this, he's in the gym and, back squats and performance and coaching fitness and health and eating well. And it's like, well, then there's this guy who's saying that he has struggled for decades and he's going on psychedelic retreats to get therapy. Like, well, these two things almost seem, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it was really hard to put that out there. Or even allow, for goodness sakes, 60 minutes, Anderson Cooper to talk about it and interview me and know that friends, family, people that, know me from they're all going to see this thing. They're going to see this vulnerable person laying on the ground, holding on to somebody's hand because you're completely afraid and shaking. And very similarly, I was like, well, if that video could help one other person, it was already worth it.
Yeah.
Already
100%.
worth it, but anyways, no, I totally understand that.
And then, when you can be free and, do your own thing, you can move past those boundaries and go, well, now I can talk about this stuff, because in a CrossFit setting context, you're not going to stand up at a seminar or leading CrossFit Health and say, well, I highly recommend everyone heads down this path. Like that's not going to fly. So now that you can be authentic. So, I mean, as we start to wrap up, like, how do you know that now, as you've been through this journey and got to where you are there warning signs or red flags that you start to pick up on when you're maybe out of alignment with who you authentically are, and how you self-correct back and go, oh, hang on a minute, I feel like I'm heading this direction?
You know what? Well, there are a couple things there. There's a feeling, right? And it's that feeling of that feeling of fear. When that starts to happen, there are a couple of things. Either, well, it comes down to not doing what is authentic, right? And sometimes doing the authentic thing is hard. So I have to really look at that feeling and or understand that feeling and saying, am I afraid? And typically what it is if I get that feeling, it's because I'm avoiding doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Typically. So I have fear because what I'm doing is actually is authentically me, but that's scary. That's scary. So I have to lean into that, right? There's got to be some curiosity there. There's I always say, like, well, you gotta really try to figure out what's on the other side of fear with that. So that's one way. And the other thing that I've done a few times is I feel like when you have these exercises, like, well, who am I? And list all these values. Like, it's not a one and done. I really think you should do these things over and over again to see these, like, what sticks. And I love Arthur Brooks' explanation from St. Thomas Aquinas on the four idols. And he talks about the four idols, and he says, we all are attracted to all four of these things, but there's always going to be one that is like our main item. It's like money and pleasure and fame and what's the other? Money, pleasure, fame. I think, is it honor?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And what you'll notice is, if you start to look at these and say, well, which one is not the most important to me? And then you start to peel back the layers and you say, well, yeah, money's great, but I don't do everything for money, right? And you pull it back and you're like, well, fame is awesome, but I don't really care about being famous. I'll knock that one off. And then the next one would be like, well, pleasure. And yeah, I can see how I would do things for pleasure, but it's maybe not the main thing. Then it's like honor, right? And then you have honor, and honor is, honor not in the sense of what you would think in like the military sense, but honor is like, people look up to me. People, there's esteem, or you know what I mean? Like they're people, and this is usually what ends up happening is when you go off track, you are making decisions specifically for this one idol. Now, it's not bad to have that idol.
No.
But when you go off track, it's because you are making a decision, not because it's authentically you, because you're going after this one thing. So it's this constant battle of checking yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And the work never ends, does it? It's like, and awareness precedes action. So you have this awareness of what your tendencies are. So now, like, if I'm feeling this way, it's going to be because of this. And that's because the work you've done to connect the dots and go, if this feeling is here, then it's because of this. So this is what I need to work on now and bring everything back in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I play this game all the time. If CrossFit came to me and they said, hey, we have this high position for you, we want you back, but I do it. And the only reason why I would do it is for the honor of it. Do I really want to be back there and work for and this is, once again, it's not a knock on CrossFit. I don't mean it that way. It's my own personal relationship to it now. Do I really want to be back there and work for CrossFit again? No. Yeah. If I were to say yes, it would be for one reason, and I play that over and over again. Not to say that it's going to happen, but it's that scenario that you put yourself in over and over again to make sure you're on the right path and you're not going after something for the sole sake of that idol itself.
Yeah, that's really powerful and even by setting yourself up with that scenario, if it did happen, you're kind of prepared because I've run it through my head 1,000 times, and I've already had the conversation 100,000 times with myself, so I know what the answer is going, and I know what to look out for if it is ever asked. You're like, I already know where I'm going to trip up here, and this is how I keep myself going.
Exactly.
So So if someone's listening to this episode today and they've been feeling like that they don't fit in their skin, that they've been faking their life, I guess, for a long time, or attaching their identity to something else, where do you think that they could start to reclaim some of themselves back, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think one of the best things, and not everybody has this opportunity. I totally get that as well. But take some time, right? I think for most of us, and like we said, and you had said it as well, and so did I, is like the hardest thing to do is sit with yourself for a little while, right? Interesting. There's old research that shows people would rather shock themselves than be bored by themselves for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And so, how do you know who you really are, and how do you start acting in accordance with that so you can feel good about what you're doing and show your true self to the world? But you're going to have to sit with yourself for a little while. Outside of that, I mean, you know, I'll tell you, you know, everybody has their people that like to listen to you. I'll say Arthur Brooks is a wonderful person who has a lot of great exercises to start working through these things to get to where you are. He's a happiness expert, which I find really interesting because I had a lot of misconceptions of what happiness was, and you know, how, you know, do you need to hold on to it, or how do you get it, or what it is it a feeling, and all these things. But yeah, I mean, I think for anybody, it's I think it starts with, you know, sitting with yourself.
Yeah, comes back. You know, I call it, when I'm working with clients, it's like coming home to yourself and just being okay to sit in that space. And you might only start with a minute and then just start building on. But yeah, you've got to be okay with you, and then learn how to be okay with you before you can expect anyone else to be, I think.
Yeah, be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's, you know, there's no authenticity without vulnerability, and, you know.
Yeah, and listen, you know, I think people need to be comfortable with reaching out to others and letting them know what's going on.
Yeah, 100%. And owning that.
Owning it. Yeah. I think that's a, you know, I think about my past. I think about things that I've experienced. Gosh, you know, what could have changed if this idea of not being in control, not knowing what the heck's going on, not liking my current self, you know, all these things. If you could recognize that, communicate it, ask for help, would go a long way.
Yeah, 100%. So the last question I like to ask every guest is to finish this sentence for me, which is, authenticity in action means?
Yeah, acting in accordance with your essence.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes back to every time. So thank you so much for your time. You have been amazing, and I feel like we could just talk on this for days. And
you've hit some topics that you said. I was like, I want to dig into this one, but I know we're short on time. But the idea of this idea of your worth, you know, when my wife comes home, and I was sitting there trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life and how worthless I felt at that moment.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't want to go into it. Well,
no, but I think we'll do a whole other episode on just that, because I think that's a big thing, like, that everybody struggles with when they're going through some sort of change and transition. 100%.
Sure.
So thank you for your time, my friend. I've genuinely appreciated this conversation.
Thank you for having me. This has been great. Thank you so much.